Can't see the three dots.
Maybe Ricardo could change your name. Could you?
I don't know.
No, I think.
Like even on your picture, on top of your picture on the right
Oh,
side.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Oh, it's so simple.
So, we are now live. So hello everyone. Thank you for joining us in our Food Talks. This program started in 2018 with a Master in Innovation in Culinary Arts, and now is also shared by the Master in Food Design. This is our 16th Food Talk, and furthermore, I would like to say that Food Talks project won in 2019 the Best Education Project from the Education Hospitality Awards for those who don't know it. It is a pleasure to continue with these talks, bringing together specialists from different areas of knowledge. And today we would like to thank Pedro Reissig, who will talk about food morphology, food forms matter. It is an honor for us that Pedro kindly accepted this invitation. Pedro has been involved in food design as a practitioner and social entrepreneur and scholar for the past decade. His design career includes several startups, the most prominent being Vaca Valiente, a long-standing MoMA store favorite. His academic work is rooted in the relationship between form and structure within a paradigm he has termed technomorphology, subject of numerous international research publications, projects, and lecture appearances. His interest in transdisciplinary of food design is motivated by the rethinking and redefining the sense and role it can play for us as people, professionals, and society. And this search for a meaningful and useful food design for improving our food lives had led him to found the Latin American Food Design Network and create a food design educational hub. His interest in product design paved the way for his food design agency in Buenos Aires, the Morfa. His most recent contribution to food design is the publication of the book in Spanish for now, Food Design hacia un ecosistema alimentario, and the launching of the Revista Latinoamérica of Food Design, You Eat What You Are. So, Pedro, I'll let with you.
Obrigado, Ricardo. That's as far as I'll go with Portuguese. Really, thank you. Every time we get the opportunity to share ideas, I'm grateful and happy to be part of what I think is a very significant and emerging discussion, critical discussion worldwide regarding food in so many senses. So today's talk, I hope it's really a talk and not a lecture, meaning there's interaction, a conversation. I'm going to spend about 40 minutes showing and sharing some ideas that I've termed food morphology. Basically, that presentation, because that will be more of a lecture format, is divided into two parts. One is a general overview, a much more graspable, I believe, much more accessible, puesta en escena, setting the table of really what I'm interested in. And then the second part is much more technical and specific, which has to do with a research project, an ongoing research project. Before I really begin getting the hands into the dough, first, I'm sorry if you hear some hammering. I'm in Buenos Aires. Things are strange. I think it's in most parts of the world. First of all, I hope all of you, friends, family, community are good or healthy. Without words, what's going on? Somehow you just keep on moving forward, but at the same time, you know, things are very, very fragile, necessarily so. Thank God we're finally assuming that the human condition is fragile and the world we live in. But my best to everyone who's struggling with with the pandemic. Let's see. Kind of to break the ice, I'd like to share very quickly what I do in food design, and then we'll get strictly into food morphology. But I became aware of the term about 20 years ago through Martí Guiché's work, and then participated in the first food design conference held in 2012 in London. After that, I'd say that's a turning point. I realized a lot of the work I've been doing, as well as some colleagues of mine here in South America, had a lot to do with this idea of food design, but we never knew there was a term for it. This often happens. So in 2013, 12 people from 5 different countries in Latin America, we founded what's called the Latin American Food Design Network. Beyond encouraging everyone to connect and see what's going on and be part of it, the reason I'm actually mentioning this is because I think it could help in our conversation to take responsibility for the framework we allude to when we use the term food design. Meaning, food design is such a buzzword now, it's everywhere. It implies different things for different people, for different actors, for different regions. So I'd like to share my understanding of what food design can mean, how it could become meaningful. And this definition, if you may, it's a working definition, an open definition, is what prompted the Latin American Food Design Network to move on. I mean, we understood that there's an opportunity to put all things food on a platform, have a loose understanding of what that can mean, and see how that can help us have better lives, namely food lives. But since food is connected with basically every aspect of the world, it's not just an optional, it's not like transportation. It's not an option. We eat to live, we live to eat. So we better really know what we're talking about if we want to make changes that seem absolutely necessary. In this sense, the working definition we are using, and we're open to change it, but for now it has become basically useful, meaningful, and that's all that matters now, with all the complications it could have, because if you don't define yourself very clearly today, it's hard for people to conceptualize who you are, what you are. People seem to need very clear definitions. It's human nature. At the same time, life is not that clean and schematic. So I'm comfortable with this looseness of the definition. That definition literally says food design is any conceivable action that can improve our relationship with food in any sense, instance, or scale. Wow, that's huge. And this can include working with edible products, materials, practices, systems, environments, contexts, technologies, basically anything food related in our definition is part of food design, because I believe probably the most significant contribution the term food design can have for the world, and not just humans, is putting together for the first time humongous amount of information, considerations, situations, interests, problems, opportunities. That's why I say everything food related for the first time needs to be put on a platform into perspective, because we have many problems. Until now, the food world was cleanly divided, albeit some fuzziness in borders, but we have professions, mainly food science and all that it implies, culinary arts, which is probably the food related profession that's been in our culture the longest time, In the United States, culinary arts is also called gastronomy. In Europe, gastronomy has a different connotation than culinary arts. The term gastronomy in Europe is probably more akin with what in the United States it's called food studies. So we have these, if you may, social sciences that work with food. We obviously have health-related practices where nutrition is fundamental. Again, food is present in health. And of course, we have design services, traditionally mainly branding and packaging, that have been involved with food. That's just professions. Then if we go to the economy, to map all food-related businesses would be a very useful and also time-consuming aspect to talk about. I don't want to go all over the place, but I'm saying my understanding of food design is not to design a food experience. That can be part of it, of course, but to really put into context and perspective all things food related. And that's no small task, especially for people who are university that have formations in different academic fields or practices, because we're used to saying, okay, we operate with food in this field. We're food scientists, we're food technologists, so our concern is this and not everything else. Since the food world has collapsed, since we die more from food than from hunger,
Yeah.
incredibly but true, we really have to rethink all our food schemas, concepts, framework, attitudes, paradigms. That's all I can say, but we are just deconstructing everything to see to try and understand a little bit better what's what and how we can be part of a better food world. That creates a lot of uncertainty and uncomfortableness when you have to define yourself. Well, what do you do? It's easier to be much more concrete and specific. When you open up the conversation so much, it is difficult, but it seems absolutely necessary at this point, because the problems are so complex that we just can't zoom in and try and solve something here without considering everything else. I'm sorry if this seemed messy, but that's really the conversation we're having in Latin America. I think we're comfortable with so much instability and fuzziness, and we really do work towards finding pathways to improve food lives. All that said and done, let me dive into now the actual subject of our meeting today. The term food morphology I've been using for about 15 years. If you Google it, you might find very few things related to microscopic chemical food analysis, but I'm using the term as a designer. As there is design morphology, there can be food morphology, meaning understanding and working with food forms as a pathway to solve problems. If we don't understand the role of form in any design field and scale, be it nano or urban design, of course, architecture, product design, fashion, all design fields need to be well versed in morphology, which basically is the study of form. Notorious but true, the food world has not paid much attention to form, even though there's too much attention on food images. So I'm trying to make that distinction from the beginning, where we're interested in food form. Maybe plate composition, of course, enters into morphology, but that's understood as an outcome of other things. We're not interested in food morphology to do a cosmetic food presentation. We're interested in underlying factors that define and inform product design, in this case, edible product design, and see how that could open up new possibilities. So let me share the screen. Ricardo, let me know if we're good here. I'll go to full screen. Are we on full screen mode?
Yeah.
Okay, so you all see the first slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've put this playful term, food forms matter, which has a double meaning in English. But it's basically, I'm posing this talk as a question. I'm sorry here, let's see, there we go. Does food form matter? I'm starting saying food forms matter, but to be honest, we have to say, does it matter? And it's not a matter of yes or no, it's a matter how does it matter, why does it matter, in what ways does food form matter? This is a very playful self-experiment. This is a famous Argentine beef called bife de chorizo, and salad and corn, Malbec wine. This food form is the exact same contents as this food form. The experiment was to enjoy my lunch and then try and swallow this, and it was very difficult. Literally,
Much for
very
that.
difficult.
We're not seeing, we're just seeing the first slide.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes. It's
Oh,
just a
boy.
title page.
Okay. Sorry, my,
No, that's okay. It's just because the way you talk seemed like.
yes, no, you're absolutely right. I've been on different slides.
So far, no beef.
So far, no beef. Let me see, let me unshare. Oof. Okay,
Perfect.
yeah, but now?
Yeah.
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 Okay. And now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to the beef. This is the beef, the beef of the matter. So this food, including the wine, was put through this blender, and here we have the result. So this is a grotesque but very clear response. Of course it matters. The same food here does not taste, see, feel, experience, or behave in the same way, okay? So there's 2 or 3 slides with text, the rest is visual. So just to be clear, I can read this out loud. Food morphology is the generation and transformation of food, considering its function and meaning, understanding the formal results of the interaction between ingredients and its transformative processes. This is how I understand food morphology. It's the morphological result, the formal result of the interaction between ingredients and cooking, shall we say, processing. This new field of design, research, and practice focuses on the form of food as product and process, since it is relevant for working better in various senses and instances, including production, processing, transportation, preparation, eating experiences, etc. Form of food is essential to its ergonomy, as well as being intrinsic to its identity in our cultural practices. This is my definition of food morphology as an emerging field of research and design. Okay. You did see, we're on the new slide, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Here are 3 very simple, I'd say even naive examples of how food forms matter. First of all, here we have a hamburger with a hole in the middle. I'm going to get deeper into this project in a little while, but just suffice for now to say, if you cook hamburger or anything without a hole in the middle, it will cook slower in the middle than in the borders because of the way heat transforms in cooking. So that would result in if you don't want raw meat in the middle, you will overcook the edges, and that causes tremendous waste of food, of energy, and many people don't like the meat overcooked. So by adding a hole in the middle, the hamburger cooks evenly. So that's a difference in the cooking process. Here we have a traditional ham and cheese sandwich. In Argentina, this is very common, toasted ham and cheese. I invite you to do your own experiment. You will find in the mouth a very different sensation when you chew a woven ham and cheese than a laminated ham and cheese. They just blend much better. And this little piece of apple you see here is called an appeloid. Here it's in Spanish, manzanoide. It's just again, a naive, but I think a telling example of how we could interact better with food morphology. When my daughter, one of my two daughters was 7, 8 years old and went to school, I'd always give her an apple. And the apple would always come back, if it came back, with a few bite marks, very dirtied, and kind of a frustration because she did not eat the whole apple and it became very unhygienic and unpleasing. So what I discovered, kind of late, but better late than never, is that a small child will not eat a 150-gram apple, will not be able to put their little mouth into a 8-centimeter diameter, three-dimensional hard object. So what I did was cut off 2 sides of the apple and glued them together by capillary action. They self-glued. And there I have a 30-gram apple with the size of her mouth and always covered by skin so it would not get dirty. So basically, I took a whole apple and made it into a child-sized apple with 2 strokes of the knife. Again, these are just provocative examples, but prove their point of concept prototypes that show how we can redefine some food morphology products and see what happens. Of course, bread is probably one of the most significant, universal, and historically relevant cultural vehicles. So bread forms culture, I think is literal in this case. And I've been researching bread forms for the past few years, and it's extremely complex, terribly diverse, and telling of different geographies, technologies, economies, religions. It's just a wonderful way to understand food morphology. Furthermore, just some well-known examples of iconic forms that can have functional or simply symbolic meaning. And here we go to some comparisons between an egg and a Doric column, talking about axial structural integrity. I don't know if you've all done the egg exercise, a raw egg. You try and break it with your hand. If you put it axially in this sense, I've never met anyone who could break the egg with one hand. Very interesting exercise. Another example, in this case, 3-dimensional, the well-known Pringle and the, of course, iconic Eiffel Tower. They both share literally 3-dimensional structural integrity. And traditional wedding cake and very well-known, I think the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, a very well-known work of postmodern architecture, share the fact that they have no structural integrity. So moving on, if we go into the field of ergonomics, if you've ever asked yourself how big is a sip of water, well, it depends the temperature of the water and how thirsty you are, but it could easily be 50 milliliters. And how big is a shot of whiskey? It could be around 15 millimeters. How big is a 3-dimensional bite? Try for yourself. And how big is a 2-dimensional bite? Again, it all depends on your mouth, your ambition, your state of mind. But it's interesting. There's not much research done in eating ergonomics. It's a good place to get involved for food morphology. Chocolate is probably one of the best known, as I mentioned earlier, bread, but also, of course, chocolate and pasta are probably three of the most, I'd say, malleable food products that can take on incredibly diverse forms and formats. This is a brief overview of about 30 different states and morphological instances of chocolate, ending here with pasta, gel, spherification, sauce, liquid, and even gas, chocolate gas. Same with pasta, we'll look at that later. Food morphology exists in a context. I'm putting a zoom into the products, but of course, beyond the ingredient and process formulation, we have organoleptic perception and health, social and cultural practices, of course, regulatory and market factors, amongst other considerations. But this is just to put it into context. This is the first definition I will share with you. I'm sorry, the second. The first was really what does food morphology, how can we understand the scope of food morphology? And this is a working definition of the morphological attributes of food. And basically what I'm saying is that all food products possess these three morphological attributes, necessarily so. You cannot avoid attending these three attributes. One is pretty obvious, a describable configuration, what most people would call shape or form. Second, a measurable size and weight. And third, this is where food differs from other product design materials. In our case, being food, it has an identifiable character, which is extremely complex. It's composed of interrelated sub-attributes. Most of these are very well known and studied: flavor, aroma, sound, texture, hardness, density, humidity, temperature, greasiness, consistency, et cetera, of course, color. And these can be fixed or variable, and also depends how they interact with each other. Basically, I'm calling this the form of flavor. So here we have three intrinsic morphological attributes of food. The short definition would be shape, size, and color. In design morphology, those are the three attributes of all design products at any scale: shape, size, and color. Color has always been misunderstood. It's an extremely complex set of sub-attributes. And here I'm extending the notion of color to character, basically for the organoleptic experience. So these are the three attributes I work with. And as it says here, from the above attributes and the interaction amongst them is that one can define all conceivable food products. This is no small goal. To define all conceivable food products is what my major research project is about, and I will show you in the second part of this presentation. So we go on. Other ways to classify attributes of food, not necessarily form, could include the virtual, orthorenolaryngological, hard word to pronounce, the haptic, digestive and metabolic, and of course, ergonomics. These are 5 or 6 different categories of analysis, just to put out more tools for you to look at. Okay, as Ricardo said at the beginning, my field of work has been termed technomorphology. It's a big word to say something which is simple but complex, that all products, at least in this world, are a result of a combination of form, material, technology, and structure. This even applies to natural products, because technology in that case is left to nature. How things transform, photosynthesis being an extremely beautiful and miraculous technology. So the interaction of these 4 attributes relates gives the final product, which is composed of its function and meaning. This is the simplest definition I could share of what I work with and how food morphology is understood. I'm going to move a little faster through this next stage. This is a food morphology matrix crossing different strategies, design strategies with design applications in this matrix. And we can look, I will share two definitions. One is structural food. Simply put, as we ask any design, built, or manufactured product to be structurally sound, especially at the architectural engineering scale, who has ever asked food to be structurally sound? I'm still amazed at many crackers or even cookies. You bite into them and they collapse. For a bridge, that would be tragic. But on a cookie, you just say, oh, what a mess. But how can we still design food that is structurally unsound? We bite a sandwich and it explodes. You put butter on a cracker and it breaks. You bite into a pizza and it spoils, it collapses. So we're all the time kind of compensating the lack of structure in food, and that's not necessary. If we think of food as a structural product, I think we will design new and very interesting food products. Here are some brief examples of a pasta semisphere composed by a string of spaghetti. This is cold cuts. This is salame that has been curved into a three-dimensional form, so it gives more flavor in the mouth. It's easier to grab. It's just a thin slice. You could do this with ham, with any laminated element. Converting it from 2D to 3D, things will happen. This is rice paper turned into an origami bird that ducked its beak into chocolate. So this was origami edibles at an event we did. This is chicken. I did this at home, so it's not chemically processed. Simply, I molded the chicken. I shredded the chicken and then molded it in this, again, structural form. And I basically had a more reliable, I'm sorry, I'm missing some words in English, but basically laminated chicken to put in sandwich. This gave it more strength. The catenary form, the egg form, this is just an ice cube. This was beginning to understand what are the best forms for ice cream, getting away from the scoop of ice cream, which exists for many good reasons, but what else? Is there a better morphology for a scoop of ice cream? Yes or no, and what would that look like? Next category, the second one I'll work with is strategy of performative food. Basically, you saw that with the hamburger. It means the hamburger performs better cooking and eating if you put a hole in the middle. So here I have braided beet stems. Here we have spinach and beet leaves that are laminated into a vegetable membrane. Here we have the woven ham and cheese. And here we have pneumatic food. This is basically a bubble gum. The role of air in food is little explored. Of course, the bubble gum being the most famous and historical, but and now we have aerated chocolates, aerated foods. How can we understand better the role of air as a technological input into food design? And to give a quick zoom, here we have technology, and here we have performance, and we have our hamburger again. This hamburger also has chunks of solid meat. So you have the benefit of having solid meat, not just ground beef. But that has to, in order to compose a hamburger with chunks of solid meat, you have to know the proportions, how fine to grind the meat, how big to cube these chunks of meat, and how they all come together. This, again, a very simple scheme. If you have 150 grams of meat, what are the different formats they can take? And that has to direct relationship with the technology. If it's in a pan on fire, in the pot, on the grill, in what's called plancha in Spanish. So regarding on the technology, the form of that meat will vary. And again, we could, next generation of the basic form is an alternative form. As you have seen here, we took this disc and simply we made a perforation in the middle, and that's the improved form. So this same mentality you see here, from the ground meat to the pan to the disc and the perforated disc, can be applied to many other types of food forms. Let me make a pause here. I will go back here on screen. I just ended the first part of the presentation. I'd like to just feel you out, questions, doubts, challenges, what your take away from this before we dive into the second part, which is much more technical. Was it understandable?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I went very fast, and it's not the same to have you in front and see your expressions and to have to do it blindly. Anything you don't agree with? I'm claiming 3 attributes, morphological attributes of all food products. I'm being a bit provocative. I'm not a rocket scientist that worked 10 years with a crew at NASA that can postulate for a Nobel Prize. This is, I mean, I'm passionate and serious about what I do. I'm a researcher at the University of Buenos Aires, but this is experimental research, and it's blurring boundaries. So when you get into an area that you're not too familiar with, you either back away, which is what most people do, so you don't make mistakes, or you just keep pushing forward. I make a lot of mistakes, but I'm moving forward. So I'm saying we can define the basic attributes of all food products. That's a pretentious, ambitious, but also extremely interesting research goal.
No, for sure.
Do you have, for example, in your projects, this idea that the shapes influences the taste when you manipulate, for example, one kind of form like the hamburger that is have this identity rooted in the product itself, then you will change the shape. This will influence also the taste of and the flavors of the food itself.
Yes, Ricardo, of course. But that specific area of, it's not just the shape, it's kind of the image, the final image influences our expectation. This has been researched for decades now. Mm-hmm. You color pasta blue and without flavor, and it'll taste different than the regular yellow pasta. We are highly influenced by visual information. So I'm not going there because many people are working very well in that area. I'm trying to put the pieces together of other aspects, mainly form, size, and character. The relationship amongst the 3 are not well studied.
Okay.
So,
but for example, when you change the shape of the product that has a deep identity, a rooted identity, right, it's quite dangerous, because people will not accept these new shapes of food because they are not. It's not part of their culture, and it's something that. For example, I was remembering the examples for pasta that already Philip Stark made it, and Giorgetto Giugiaro already made the new designs for pastas. thinking about the shape and the form and all of the structure of the pasta. And after all, the products doesn't last so much time in the market because people do not accept this kind of changes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful example you brought in, Ricardo. I don't think Philip Stark was expecting anything else than what happened, which is a lot of media attention.
Yeah.
So I'm not guided by market results. I'm in fact very, very cautious and distant from market results. They are extremely important. If you need to make money quickly, you will see, oh, the market will reject this. Now, if you want to do things, if you want to help things move forward and eventually see some profit, even though, like in my case, when I work as a researcher, I'm not interested in an economic return, I'm interested in contributing. So we might propose things that will break expectations. So there will be rejection from the market, but maybe 10 years down the line with good marketing and other things, I mean, all food forms evolved and we might be stuck on the round hamburger for 200 years. Then White Castle or Wendy's will come along and we'll have the square hamburger. In that case, it's not better a square hamburger than a round hamburger. Simply, it's different. When things are different, you're very susceptible to fads and fashion. But when things are better, if we prove that making the holes in the hamburger will cook them faster, evener, so it'll be more delicious and less energy waste, given the 30 million hamburgers fast food made per day, we will be able to patent it and people will start, that will be the new normal, an intelligent hamburger.
Yeah.
So of course there will be rejection, polemics, but if we're justify that this is better than that for these reasons, at least we're contributing. And of course, cultures that are set on their ways will not be interested, and that's fine. It's not for everybody. It's like architecture. You come with green architecture, we're not asking Italian villas to get demolished and put up green architecture. We're just moving forward step by step.
Hi,
Thank you.
Professor
Yes.
Pedro, it's Aisha. Thank you so much
Hiya.
for your talk. I found it very interesting. I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. And to add to what was mentioned just before me, I think it's also interesting what you said, because I don't think it's only valuable for the markets. When you were speaking about the ergonomics and how you looked at your daughter's lunchbox and you were taking into account how much food waste, you can start off through communication to mothers and households and explain to them the basic ergonomics around children and lunch boxes, and hopefully that will lead to less food waste. So it's maybe some of the solutions are not only lying within the market, but there might be other ways in which we can use this information to address other problems in other sectors.
Aisha, thank you. You nailed it. I mean, I was responding to Ricardo's comment on market success, but absolutely. I mean, we're interested in just helping everyone improve better practices. Mothers, fathers, children, neighbors, communities. And it all starts at home, you with you, to connect what's in an apple, what's in a fried egg, what's in my mate or coffee. Why do I eat this? In fact, Ricardo mentioned the new magazine, the Latin American Food Design magazine. The subtitle is, "You Eat What You Are." I don't know if you caught on to that, but it's not "you are what you eat."
Yeah.
You are what you eat is, I think Homer Simpson characterized it very well, sitting at the diner eating a burger and his body is a hamburger. Yes, that's very true, but more interesting is to take home the idea that you eat what you are. So who are you? What's in your head, in your heart? So that leads you to make the food choices you make continuously probably without thinking about it, because we're on automatic pilot. So I grab coffee in the morning. There are 40 micro decisions involved in my cup of coffee, but it's set for now. So I just push buttons, grab this, grab that, buy that, do this. But if I look who I am, I might do that whole coffee thing differently. I might not even do coffee. So that the invitation is to take a look at who you are, start at home, 3 times a day, 5 times a day, once a day. Who are you as a food decider in your own life?
Thank you for the feedback.
No, please, thank you. Ricardo, can I take another 10 minutes to show the research?
Yes, please.
Just give me a second here. Okay, are we on the new screen? You see the new
Yes.
screen?
Yes.
And is it moving now?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to show here, again, briefly, I've termed this project called Alimentex towards a model for visualizing all conceivable food products. I'm going to skip these texts. I think we could later post this presentation so you could look at it clearly. But basically, let me go back. Let me speak here first. What I'm showing here, termed Alimentex, is a modelization, very simple, oversimplified, I will say, how the 3 things I've been mentioning can interact, which is ingredients, transformation, can be considered technology if you may, and forms. I'm saying all food products are made obviously from food ingredients. They are transformed. We will see later, we can add criteria, but by hand, by machines, for better, for worse, but everything is transformed. And there are forms, the original form, the final form, the intermediate forms. I'm interested in the interaction of ingredients, transformation, and forms. This is what this model called Alimentex is all about. There are 2 keys to this research project. First, if I'm saying I have a computer model program that will take any ingredient you want, any processing technique you want, and see what the final form can be, that sounds simple enough. It's extremely complex, but at least we can describe it, we can visualize it, we can imagine, correct? The first question will be, where do I get my database from? When I say all food ingredients, did I download the dictionary of all food? Is that in alphabetical order? I mean, if I want to know what is my food database, that's an extremely, extremely complex question. And of course, multiple possibilities for answering that question. But I'm tackling that. I'm saying, if I want to make a list of all ingredients, I'm not actually going to make that list. I'm going to design the categories of analysis to be able to, for someone else, for NASA, for European community, to create that list, because it's, of course, unmanageable by one person, even a research department at my university. It's beyond our means. But it's not beyond our means to ask the question and pose some modeling concepts. So that's one question. How do we tabulate all conceivable food ingredients? Second, how do we do that with all food processes? Of course, Ferran Adrià would love that question, but he just said, oh, let's do this. And he made a universe of possibilities. What if we say, well, what can you do in the kitchen, your kitchen, industry kitchen, historically, I'm sorry, traditional kitchen, in the Andes Mountains with just stone and wood? Can we conceptualize all possible food processing possibilities? And third of all, the much harder question to answer, what are all possible forms? Whoever answers that will be a Nobel Prize because that's applicable not just to food. We don't have a atlas of forms. We don't have 3,048 forms. So I'll take from the shelf, from my catalog, the sphere, the ellipse, the pyramid. Life does not work that way. Forms are the endless possibilities of combinations of form attributes. So there's not a set catalog of forms. So given, excuse me, given this incredible challenge of conceptualizing all edible ingredients, all transformation practices or processes, and all possible forms, given these three open, endless, infinite universes, which I'm calling here databases, we can still move forward. And what I'm going to show you is my work in progress of these three databases and how we can begin to visualize their interaction. That's the scope of this research. So now let me go back to the share screen. And here we are. Okay, so first of all, I'm starting with natural food products. I want to understand what are fruits and vegetables. How can we conceptualize them morphologically? How can we understand them? And then I'll move on to designed foods. So here I'm just, these are hypotheses, work in progress. I'm saying all fruits and vegetables basically can fit into these 13 typologies. In 0 dimension, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, and 3 dimension. Can you see what I'm showing here with the cursor, with the pointer?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, so this column, here are the names in Spanish and here are the images. So if you take an orange, fits into this category. Then if we take that sphere and have it agglomerations of spheres, we can have the grapes. And if we have this special vegetable, the spheres grow along a stem. It's another type of growth. So here I'm looking for basic typologies of natural foods. This is very boring, but this has to do with what state, what conformation, and the type of growth organization. Is it simple, compuesto, or clustered? We're not going to get into this, but the dimension of the food, is it 0, 1, 2, or 3 dimensions, and how it grows. Not just is a cucumber a one-dimensional cylinder, but how does that cucumber grow? So I'm looking at how food grows and how the food product ends up. Okay, and what we have here is about the 13 files, 13, what's the word? Fichas, I guess files. We have for each of the representative natural food, in this case, the orange, I break down to the symmetry, the typology, the size, the visual aspect, the texture, and how it grows. Single or compound, the symmetry of the growth. And here are tabulations, numerical tabulations, how we can measure these attributes. So I've done that for garlic, for banana, for yams, for cebolla, cibulet, and so on and so on. So I took the 13 typologies I'm proposing and started exploring, do they really fit into these typologies? Once that work was done, now I apply it to design food, and here I'm showing you a similar table as as the first table I showed you back here, I'm sorry, the analogy of the design foods to this table for natural products is the one I'm trying to show you here. Sorry. So this table shows pasta in 0 dimension. That would be a vector, a point. I think you might call it pastina. When you have micro grains of pasta, I don't know how you call it in Portugal.
Couscous.
I'm sorry?
Couscous.
Well, yes, couscous from pasta, yes. In 1 dimension, of course, you have, I think what is termed spaghetti. If you see a zoom here, this is a round cross section, whereas this is a flat cross section. We call this in Spanish cinta, ribbon pasta, ribbon spaghetti. If it's planar, it could be like the bow, like the alphabet pasta, and like the lasagna sheets. If it's tubular, again, you see the different, if it's straight, textured, rounded with texture. Here are the cross sections. Then if it's 3-dimensional but open, like these examples, or 3-dimensional closed like a gnocchi. Again, it's an experimental research trying to contemplate the actual, the morphological table for pastas. Then similar to the natural foods, I take the different types of pasta and go in depth and look at their configuration, external, internal, their symmetry, types and numbers, the typology, the size, et cetera, et cetera. So I did this for those. This is the model that I described in the beginning. It's in Spanish. These are ingredients, these are processes, and these are forms. So how would this element text actually work? Well, let's skip the text. And here I have 6 different situations. You can begin with ingredients. Let me say that here. You can just with the ingredient and see what processes and forms come out of that ingredient. This is if you just set one input. I can list all the processes and see what forms and ingredients can work with that process. Or I could say, I want these forms and ask what ingredients and what processes will give me that form. Or I could work with 2 inputs as shown in the inferior line here. I could work with ingredients and processes and my output will be a form. I could work with ingredients and forms. My output will be the processes, or I could work with processes and forms and my output will be the ingredient. That's complex. Here are more examples. I'm going to skip them and go to the 3 databases and end this presentation here. So ingredients. I have divided, this is one of infinite ways to categorize all possible food products. What I've done here is differentiated between the fundamental food and the augmenting food, alimento potenciador. So this is food that I eat for nutritional, and this is ingredients that help the fundamental food do things better, especially flavor-wise. Everything in gray is not my original work. These are the family biological breakdown of plant life. And what I've done here is taken herbaceous plants in orange and looked at 4 different ways to understand what ingredients I could get from plants. One is how that plant is cultivated. Is it organized agriculture or wild agriculture? The different stages of growth. Is it a seed? Is it a brote, a small plantain, the plant itself? As it grows, it flowers and then gives fruit. So we could look at the different instances of growth. So from the same plant, I might get 3 different instances. I might take its seeds at some point. I might take its flowers and it might take its fruit. We could also see what part of the plant, the parts of the plant are not the same as the growth instances. Parts of the plants are seed, brote, the bulb, the root, the rhizoma, the tuberculo, the stem, the leaf, the flower, the fruit. I can see that as growth instances or parts of plants. And then how am I cultivating it? Am I pulling it out of the ground? Am I picking the fruit so it grows back next year? Am I cutting it at the stem, at ground level? So all I'm doing here is breaking down plants into different categories so I could begin to understand what is my food source. Extremely complex. I know I'm going very fast and it's probably confusing, but if you just stay with a snapshot that you can take a plant and ask yourself, how can I understand how this plant can give me food? I've offered 4 visions of how to understand that plant. If you just go to the books, it'll say, okay, the plant, the corn plant, you can use the stem, the husk, the grain, the cob. Basically, that's that. Then it could tell you what you can do with the kernels, of course, but it already departed from a scheme that might not be the best scheme to understand what can the corn plant give me. If I just look at its parts, it's very different if I understand its growth stages, the form, the way it's harvested, or the way it's cultivated. If we jump to processes, I will just briefly walk you through that. I'm posing, there's a strategic question at the top here. What strategies, technologies, method, instruments can be employed for transforming one or more ingredients from state A to state B? My model here says there are 3 types of process transformations: mechanical, physical, and chemical. These are not cut and dry. Many of the processing techniques involve 1 or 2 or more of these 3 categories, but I think it's interesting to conceptualize all food processing methods through some kind of organizational framework. And these are my ideas on that. If we go to form, that's even harder. I'm sorry. These are all endless branch diagrams. So I'm basically saying, let's look at form attributes, variables, and states. We will not delve into this. Again, the strategic question at the top of this chart: what forms can be created utilizing 1 or more of the process and ingredients seen in the previous maps? Everything I've described comes together in this flow diagram where I walk you through from the plant, the corn plant. The yellow path are the choices I've made. At every instance here in this tree, again, you'll have to download it and look at it with a zoom. For example, the first decision is, do I cook it? Do I peel it? Or is there another option? You take the corn husk, the ear, the corn ear, and you have to decide what to do with that. So, well, we're running out of time. Okay, so here's another example with the cow. And these are some earlier research parts I went through to get to my element text. Again, I know we ran the risk of going all over the place, but in summary, I'm proposing we start modeling, envisioning what is the food scape for food design, what's involved, and start operating on those different models. And in this huge research project, I have very clear that I need to understand better these 3 aspects of the element text, and each one is a huge research project in and of itself. But I think it's useful now just to envision that everything we do in the kitchen, in the fire, in an industry involves these three universes of contents. If you may, they become databases. When you go in the kitchen and say, what's for dinner? You work with the element text in a much more fluid and spontaneous way, but you are deciding what ingredients, but your universe is what's in your fridge and your cupboard. It's not like I'm doing with real field work. What are my tools? You might have a stove, an oven, water, a blender, a knife, maybe nothing, your hands, your teeth, those are totally tools. And what are the forms I want? You might not ask that question, or it might be very important. If you're making a cake, you will have to answer that question because the cake ingredients are formless. It's batter. In order to cook it, you need to give it a form. Unless you throw the batter up in the air in a huge oven and you will have a formless cake, which is a very interesting concept. But if you're not able to do that and burn yourself, you will put it in a mold. So you are thinking, and as Ricardo would say, we have an expectation, oh, this looks like a cake. Good, it's a cake. And what if it looks like a pizza? But it's cake batter. So every day, you're all food designers, all of us are, whether we call it ourselves or not, because we engage in this endless and seamless decision-making process that involves ingredients, processes, and forms. That's basically what I'm interested in. Putting emphasis on forms, which I think is very, very overlooked, but I have to work with the raw materials in the process. Forms is not an afterthought that I say, okay, let me make it this shape. I think we ran out of time, Ricardo.
No. Wonderful. Thank you. So anyone have some questions for Pedro? No questions.
Provocations?
I think I really find it very interesting your work because I always fascinating about this idea that shape has this kind of influences on food, not only by the taste of food, but because of the preferences that we have with our food choices. And I think that this project, it's very wide and complex, and you will have endless options in having these combinations of form, processing, and ingredients. And I was remembering, for example, the projects that already exist, like food pairing, that you know that some ingredients work well with another ingredients, but it's something that you will have an end for that. And I think in this kind of in the case of your project, it's something that you will have something to add because you have plenty of ingredients, endless forms, and the processing. And for example, I'm thinking that you and Argentina in South America, you have different kinds of processing that we have, for example, in Europe. So if you expand your project, it's enormous. So I think it's very interesting, this idea of food morphology. I'm following your work for some years now. So thank you very much, Pedro.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Ricardo.
Anyone for some questions? No? No questions. Okay. Pedro, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And I think that's it.
My pleasure to share with you all. Even your silences accompany me. I do this for this reason, just to build community.
And I hope we could collaborate in the master with the students in this idea of the working in shape and processing and exploring these kind of ingredients, because not only for the students in food design, but also for the students in innovation in culinary arts, because I think this could be very interesting to explore, not only for designers, but also for the professionals on food production. So I hope that we could collaborate soon. So
Sounds great.
thank you
great.
very much.
My pleasure, and best to all of you. Stay healthy, silly, as they say.
Okay, Pedro.
Looking forward to meeting again.
Okay, thank you very much. See you on 25. Okay.
Then, yes. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.